Regulation is looming for Google, Facebook, and actually tech giants as a whole. Facebook's been stocking up on antitrust lawyers. Google recently came out, the CEO, Sundar Pichai, came out and said, please don't regulate us, government. We need to innovate and make the future. And then we saw Josh Hawley introduce a bill that would strip liability protection these companies enjoy under Section 230 if they can't prove they're politically neutral. That's a very difficult thing to do. However, in a recent Supreme Court ruling, Google has, it's basically having to do with public access versus, state and private actors. Google is defending their right to censor people. And boy, I got to tell you what, this is probably one of the greatest problems we're facing in this generation. And it's funny. When I was on the Joe Rogan podcast, there were people who said, who mocked me, ridiculed me when I said that I think censorship on social media is one of the biggest problems we are facing. Many of these people probably don't understand what's happening. So I kind of feel like, I'm standing at the shore and I've watched the water start receding. And all the people around me are looking at the water receding going like, wow, the water's leaving. And I go, guys, that means a tsunami is coming, run. And they go, oh, please, the water's going the other way. And what's going to happen next? The tsunami. One of two things is going to happen in response to this. I've got another story pulled up. Advertising companies don't want to be involved. These companies are saying we have a right to censor. Why? They're scared of losing advertisers. That's their bread and butter. But they're causing damage to to the commons, to the right to engage in civics, the right to civic engagement. So let's see what's happening with this story and what's really interesting about this is that the ruling from the Supreme Court has nothing to do with big tech, but they've seized upon it to say, aha, we have a legal right. We have a legal right to censor whoever we want. From the Daily Wire, Google claims new SCOTUS ruling hurts PragerU's censorship claim. This is from Josh Hammer, who writes, as the Daily Wire first reported back in 2017, PragerU filed a lawsuit against YouTube and Google, its parent company, for unlawfully censoring its educational videos and discriminating against its right to freedom of speech. Now, I'm going to stop right here and say something. I've been very critical of YouTube recently. It is a dangerous place to start a business. And as you may notice, I'm in a new office. Okay. I was trying out the van. For those that aren't familiar, I built we're doing a news van, youtube.com/subverse videos. We actually have a recording studio. We're hiring people. Like, this is full swing. But I'll tell you what, YouTube censorship, Facebook, Twitter, all of this stuff makes it very, very scary. They've dominated the ad market. So if you want to be a player in this game, you go through them. And they could Thanos you in 2 seconds. But I will say this. As much as I will be critical of them, YouTube is still a great opportunity. I make money on here. Fantastic. I'm able to start this business. I do think YouTube does a better job than most in defending free speech, but they're still on the negative, right? Free speech should be defended on these private platforms because they've dominated the marketplace. YouTube is not the worst actor. They're actually one of the best, but they're still unaccountable and they're still negatives. As for PragerU, I'm gonna say it. Prager, guys, I personally, based on a cursory glance of the story, do not believe they have a case because what they're suing over is what's called restricted mode. Restricted mode is basically at the bottom of every YouTube page, you can turn it on or off. You can just do it. So if your videos are in restricted mode disappear, of which all of mine do, that's just like for a school to, remove this and say like, hey, these are things we don't want. Now, I guess the argument from Prager University is that, they think their content is above board and educational and shouldn't be restricted. That way, if schools want only some kind of content, PragerU shouldn't be included in that. If that's where the suit goes, fine. But I think you're pushing a line here, right? The issue is that there are YouTube channels that have been just deleted outright. That's terrifying. Channels that have broken no rules. My go-to here is always going to be Mumkey Jones. If you're not familiar, he was an edgy boy making jokes. A lot of his content was really good, insightful, thoughtful. He had one video about Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And you might be thinking, I don't care about that movie, but it was actually a really good analysis of how this character is a sociopath. And it wasn't offensive at all. But he had some edgy videos that didn't break any rules. And one day, YouTube just deleted them. That's what we're concerned about. That's the real issue. Look, man, if YouTube wants to create a secondary feature that hides my videos, I gotta say, I don't care, right? When they start age restricting, that gets me a little worried. But for the most part, the videos I've had that have been age restricted, I kind of shrug and say, I get it, man. I'm talking about war, conflict, crisis. When they demonetize videos like this, then I get frustrated. Okay, it's like, I get it. I have no right to their ads, but seriously, why would I made a video. This was really bothered me. I made a video about Facebook regulation, and they demonetized it. And I said, clearly it's a mistake because, and let's be real, 60 to 70% of the content I make every day is demonetized, right? So it's like I make 6 to 7 videos and like 4 or 5 will be demonetized. But usually a day later they reinstate it, but it's too late. You don't make money then. They confirmed my Mark Zuckerberg video, and I'm like, why is Google protecting Zuckerberg? Yeah, because they're all buddies to an extent. But let's get back to the story. They say this week PragerU, a conservative not-for-profit organization founded by Dennis Prager, filed a lawsuit against Google and YouTube for unlawfully censoring its educational videos and discriminating against its right to freedom of speech. In an interview with the Daily Wire on Friday, PragerU CEO Marissa Streit underscored that the far-reaching free speech implications of her organization's legal action against what has become two of the most important public forums in the world, and explained why their legal team feels very strongly they can win. So don't take my opinion for it. I'm not a lawyer. In a press release issued Tuesday, PragerU's legal team, which includes Harvard's Alan Dershowitz and former California Governor Pete Wilson, and Eric George of Brown George Ross, among several others, laid out the rationale of the lawsuit, which was prompted by Google YouTube restricting or demonetizing over 50 PragerU videos for what YouTube claims is inappropriate content for younger audiences. There's an interesting argument here. PragerU has videos where it's like, why can we talk about World War II Germany but not the Soviet era, right? Why is it that no one cares about what the Soviets did? And that's something kids should probably learn about. It's history. You want to guide them into it because history is brutal. But then one of the challenges then is you always end up with one story from history is like the most important, and we ignore China. Excuse me. We ignore China. We ignore the Soviet Union, etc. So I think that's one of the things they're getting at. I don't know. But I will add this to my earlier comment about whether they could win. I'm not a lawyer. If their team looked at it and they're confident, well, then we'll leave it there. But here's what's happening, because I told you about this ruling, and now we're 7 minutes in, but let me read it. They say, earlier this week, the Supreme Court handed down its ruling in the case of Manhattan Community Access Corp v. Halleck. As described by SCOTUS blog, the court held that Manhattan Community Access Corp., a private nonprofit corporation designed by New York City to operate the public access channels on the Manhattan cable system owned by Time Warner, now Charter, is not a state actor subject to the First Amendment. The court's case reflected a traditional ideological split. Justice Kavanaugh wrote a 5-4 majority and was joined by the traditional conservative-leaning bloc of Chief Justice Roberts and Thomas Gorsuch and Alito. The 4 liberal-leaning justices dissented. It's really interesting. I don't necessarily know enough about this case. I feel like I would lean more in favor of the liberal-leaning justices. Here, once again, we have Justice Kavanaugh writing the majority opinion. He's been very prolific since joining the Supreme Court. And I got to say, there have been a lot of cases Brett Kavanaugh has opined upon, and I was impressed. I was like, wow, he's spot on. I actually think he's right here, and Daily Wire agrees. They say from a black letter legal perspective, this is almost assuredly the correct outcome. Private actors are not synonymous with state actors, and our legal tradition and case law has always been imbued with that carefully delineated distinction. It does not suffice that, as Justice Sotomayor wrote in dissent, Manhattan Community Access Corp. May or may not have stepped into New York City's shoes in terms of the applicability of the First Amendment. But now Google is publicly boasting that the ruling in Manhattan Community Access Corp. Undermines PragerU's legal claim. This is dangerous, dangerous precedent. There's an interesting point to be made here. This is my understanding, I could be wrong, but it sounds like what they're saying is a private company is running public access. And the Supreme Court said, well, it's a private company, they can do what they want, even though they're stepping into the public space. This is what's really worrying to me, because YouTube is becoming the commons, Twitter, the Facebook, they are taking over the commons. Now we've got Facebook talking about this insane currency. That's a nightmare, okay? When Facebook starts using technology to take over our right to trade, I'm telling you all, we're standing at the shoreline, and I am watching that water recede because a tsunami is coming, and it's going to wipe everything out. And you know what? Unfortunately, there's sometimes nothing you can do about it. These big companies that control the conversation, they don't like that I talk about this. These videos get demonetized. Like I said, my video about Mark Zuckerberg was confirmed by someone at YouTube to be like, you can't make money on that. And while my message still got out to like 400,000 people, which is awesome, here's what they do. They want me to only make videos that I think will make me money. So when they demonetize something, what they're really trying to do is nudge you. Not always. Sometimes they're just like, come on, man, you can't make money off that. And I understand. Like, there's conflict, crisis, etc., and sometimes you can't make money on it. But when I make a video about Mark Zuckerberg saying it's time for regulation, what they're doing is wrong, and they demonetize it, what, in my opinion, I think they're trying to say, these videos don't make money, right? Because they're hoping that I'll say, well, if I want to make money, I won't talk about it. Yeah, sorry. I will talk about what I want to talk about. Fortunately for now, I'm still standing near the edge of the, I'm standing far enough from the cliff. I've not fallen into the void of censorship where they've wiped out my videos, but they're certainly getting to the point where they're demonetizing most of my videos. And I think the reason is, to a certain degree, right? I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but I certainly believe some videos get demonetized because they're like, although it doesn't break the rules, they confirm it manually. Literally, someone at YouTube is like, let's not put ads on this. Why? Think about that. Over time, people will fall in line. I'm not the only one who's brought this up. A lot of people have said they're trying to tell us like, hey, you can make money if you do videos about Skittles and rainbows. Skittles and rainbow, whoo, candy canes. Do that. You'll be rich. Don't be principled. Principle, oof, that's controversial. You can't do that. Every day, I'm making 6 to 7 videos. Usually, I'm mostly doing 6 now because Subverse is kind of being taken over and we've got people coming in. They're all demonetized. My main channel now is, it's doing okay as of right now. I don't know why. I will say this, I will be at VidCon, YouTube. Like, I think YouTube likes me to a certain degree because I'm like publicly acceptable dissent. You know what I mean? Like, I don't insult people. My opinions are kind of tepid. I still call out certain things. So it creates an opportunity to, I think what they like about me is that dissenters will come to me for dissenting content and I'm not particularly out there, right? That's just my opinion as to why they tolerate what I do. But rest assured, when Sundar Pichai comes out and says, please don't regulate us, and I make, how many videos in the past week, 15 or so, where I'm like, regulate, you can't imagine they'd like that, right? Let's read a little bit now about what Google is saying to defend their right to censorship. As Media Post reports, Google is now telling the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that the Manhattan Community Access Corp ruling protects companies like itself from lawsuits alleging censorship. YouTube is a private service provider, not a state actor. And its editorial decisions are not subject to First Amendment scrutiny. Google writes in new court papers. When a private entity provides a forum for speech, the private entity is not ordinarily constrained by the First Amendment because the private entity is not a state actor. Hold on. They say ordinarily, and I'll tell you why. There are instances where privately owned spaces are subject to the First Amendment. I would argue that applies to YouTube. Now, of course, they're rushing to their defense because they need to. They want to protect their bottom line. But at a certain point, you become too big. Let's read on. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote for the majority, the private entity may thus exercise editorial discretion over the speech and speakers in the forum. Aha. But now it gets interesting. Editorial discretion. Google, are you taking that defense? I think that may run afoul of the good faith Section 230, like the understanding of what Section 230 was supposed to be. A good faith effort to make a hospitable platform, not editorial discretion. That's different. So perhaps, YouTube, you should get editorial discretion, and then you'll be liable for everything you editorially chose to publish. Or perhaps you should act more like a phone company and allow people to talk. That's where I think we should be. Now, ads and recommendation, totally different story. If people choose to go to your content, well, so be it. The problem with YouTube is the subscriptions mean nothing. So Google says the same logic applies to claims by the right-wing Prager University. The tech company writes that the ruling affirmed the Constitution does not disable private property owners and private lessees from exercising editorial discretion over speech and speakers on their property. Interesting. It sounds like Google's taking we're a publisher. We have a legal right to publish or not publish whatever we want. They use a First Amendment argument. It's not Section 230. When Twitter says we can delete whatever we want, it's a First Amendment argument. They say we have First Amendment protected speech, and no one can force us to publish speech we don't want. But Section 230 specifically says these companies are not, they're deemed not to be the speakers of that content. Thus they would act more like a phone company. They want it both ways. It's, you know what, man? I don't know what the right thing to do is. I know there are people saying don't regulate, and there are people saying they should regulate, but I'll tell you this. Do something. Let's sit down and figure it out, because letting big tech monopolize and grow bigger, and now they're trying to, now Facebook's moving into economics. No, okay? This is what really bugs me, is all the people on the left ignoring this, yelling, but my private platform. You've got conservatives, because conservatives are being banned and wiped out left and right. Although, look, I get it. Conservatives really do dominate in terms of shares and all this stuff. And thus, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter are coming after them more so than the left. This gets people on the right saying it's time to do something. But you still got a lot of conservatives saying, no regulation. You've got the boot of Google, Facebook, and Twitter on your neck. At a certain point, you might want to look up and be like, hey, how about no? And I love the saying bootlicker. Imagine this. Left-wing anti-war groups have been censored and banned. Project Veritas did a video about Pinterest, an investigation. But did you know, because I did a video too and it got deleted, but did you know it wasn't just live action? The anti-media was also on their list. They're anti-war left. It's really strange to me. I understand why they, the bias against live action, right? It's a left-right thing. But why are they banning anti-war stuff? That's creepy. Right? I get it. You shouldn't ban either of it, but isn't it kind of weird? Who's pro-war? There are people, for sure, but that's kind of weird. So here's the thing. I step up and say, hey, don't do this. CNN targets Mavic Media. I say, hey, don't do this. David Nywert writes a book about, the far right, gets banned from Twitter. I say, hey, don't do this. And they respond with, but my private company. Like, you are looking at the boot. Like, these people are literally licking the boot of Facebook and Google every time they say, but my private platform. At least it's not the government, they say. When did the left become the libertarians? At least it's not the government. Okay, look. You need a balance, okay? You can't just have laissez-faire capitalism, because without constraint, this is what you get. And I told this to some Trump dudes I was talking to. I was talking to like 3 Trump supporters. They're very libertarian. And they said we shouldn't have regulation, yada, yada, yada. And I said, so you think these media companies should be allowed to lie, manipulate, cheat, and steal, and ban conservatives? And they're like, no. And I'm like, great. Maybe we should have some kind of protection from the commons from unrepentant capitalism. Capitalism at its core, not bad. Pretty good, actually. Probably the only way to create an efficient system at grand scale. But you still have to have checks and balances, because you'll end up with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And this is why I've always been on the left, right? So like the liberals were always like, we can't let these companies run amok. I agree. Well, fortunately, now we're seeing some people step up. But I want to get to the next story, because there's something even scarier. I don't know how this will play out for those of us on YouTube. A lot of us are going to get banned. Advertisers said they are saying they could go somewhere else. So here's the thing. Excuse me. There's like an economy that was built upon Facebook and Google. BuzzFeed, Vox, etc. They're laying people off. They're laying people off because Facebook changed its algorithm. On YouTube, you have people like me. You have people like Crowder and others, and Dave Rubin, who have built a career monetizing through YouTube. YouTube is trying to make sure they can stay on top of protecting advertisers, which means they want to get rid of bad stuff. If the advertisers leave because Facebook and Google won't deal with the problems, we all hurt. But I will say this. I think regulation might actually be the saving grace. If Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. went to the advertisers and said, listen, we can't do anything. This speech is legally protected. If you want to put up a billboard in the middle of downtown Chicago, someone might stand next to that billboard holding up a sign that you don't like. And then someone will take a picture and your sign will appear next to that. You can't do anything about that. The same is true for the internet. So I don't know what else to say, right? I know that we're going through trying times. I don't think that, I think YouTube does a generally better job of protecting free speech. But at the end of the day, they're not protecting free speech. They're arguing against it. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. Next segment to come at 1 p.m. on this channel. The podcast every day at 6:30 p.m. Go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. I am in a new office. Things are starting to heat up. I just set this up, so there's a lot of technical glitches to work out. My videos yesterday, I know they were stuttering and stuff. Computer couldn't handle it. So there's a lot of work's got to be done. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all in the next segment.